All right, let's call the meeting to order, folks. It is 6:06 on June 6th, 2023. Everybody ready? Are we recording? And good? Okay. This is a work session of the West Liberty City Council, where we'll talk about the work of the fire task force. And I'll do the roll call here. We have tonight in the room, Mayor Pro-Tem Cara McFerren, City Council members Dana Dominguez, Ashley Smith, Josh Schiltz, and Omar Martinez. And thank you everybody for joining us, members of the rural trustees, members and leadership of the West Liberty Volunteer Fire Department Association. We're really glad we can do all this together. I'll just say a few words and I'm going to hand it to the chair of the task force, Dana Dominguez. Again, I said this kind of last time we were here at getting started with this conversation or the last time we went over these documents. Many years ago, decades ago, the powers that be at that time, I don't think any of us in the room were there, I don't think, but the powers that were in place at that time decided that since somebody needs to be responsible for the taxpayer dollars that fund the fire department and EMS services, the way it's always done is that there's an entity set up to manage that, and so that was decided to be the city of West Liberty. And then there's an agreement with the rural townships surrounding the city that also pay money into that and have a certain amount of oversight over the system, that agreement at the current time. So what we're looking at is transitioning that model to a different model, potentially, where there is a third-party agency that has representatives of the city, representatives of the rural townships, who come together along with potentially some community members to manage the emergency services instead of the city of West Liberty being the legal entity that's responsible for that. Then that would be transferred to the agency. That's what we're talking about. I think it's helpful to just kind of give an overview. I'd like to give congratulations to the task force, because this has been, I think it's 11 months now. The task force has been meeting since Mayor McCullough set up the task force, and tonight is the first night. Right now, we're going to review the drafts of the actual documents that could go into effect to create the agency. But that's been a really long project for the task force. It's been an enormous amount of work. And this is a huge step to be here tonight and have these documents here in front of us. Could we give the task force a round of applause? I would really. I would like to say lastly, before I hand it over to Councilmember Dominguez, there is still, I think, a ways to go. This is a very complicated project, and so I would anticipate that there is probably are changes that are needed, I would guess, and there's a consultant in the mix who will be reviewing things. We'll talk about that. So I think it's important that we don't put any deadline on it just yet. The city council needs to be comfortable with what we're doing here. The rural trustees need to be comfortable with what we're doing here. The fire department needs to be comfortable with what we're doing here. And we may still have some negotiation to get through before we get to that point. So it's really important. I would just ask for everyone's patience that we can process through that and get to that point. I know Solon has been held out as an example of this. They started with, I think, in nowhere near the contentious situation that West Liberty started with, and still took a very long time to get things set up and processed. So just bear with the entire crew who's working on this. There is still a ways to go, but I think that this is an incredible step forward, and I'm really happy that we're here. With that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Ms. Dominguez.
Thank you, Mayor. And I wanted to just thank you all for coming today. I'm going to try to be as clear as possible. I know that you don't have the documents in front of you, but the task force members have been provided the packet. Is that correct? Shari, you forwarded the packet to task force members. And I again just wanted to thank them. And I'm going to read this very short little paragraph that I introduced kind of what we're doing today to the council, just so you all can kind of get a feeling of what they have read in the packet. So the mayor's fire and EMS special task force has spent countless hours over the past year working together with its members, the mayor and the city administration to discuss various ideas on how to repair, strengthen, and revitalize the important relationships necessary to assure quality and reliable EMS and fire services continue to be available in our area. This includes over 20 in-person meetings, several additional hours outside of those meetings to review and revise on our own personal time for the past 11 months. So we have been continuously meeting, have spent many, many hours in trying to get this right. And hopefully the work session will provide an updated proposal that can be hopefully seen as what is needed as a final proposal from the task force to finally make those final decisions amongst the rural trustees and the city to form this agency, whether it's through the mediation or through the consultant, but we can talk about that in a minute. Also, I want to invite the task force members to just raise your hand or intervene as needed, because I've got a lot going on and my memory is not the best these days. So if you remember something differently or have something to add, please feel free to jump in. I really depend on you all, and so you're always welcome to provide your wisdom and how you remembered it. So we hope to offer what we have to offer will hopefully provide the clarity and vision as to what exactly the new 28E agency would look like and how it would operate if approved. In addition to completing our task to review and propose a viable 28E agency for consideration, the task force is happy to share, well, I won't say that one part because that's up in the mix. So I will say it, the volunteer members, we really appreciate that you approved the consultant to that could possibly be paid for by the association funds. Is that right, Mindy? Up to $7,800. That is a huge help and support. And then in addition, the city has also had communication with the consultant, and we believe that they might be able to support us even more, where of course we would contribute to that cost as well to get this in the bag, to finalize it, to get it done. So we can talk about that in a little bit. And of course, once the consultant completes their report, it'll be provided. So those who were here the last time, if you remember, we got a lot of feedback from trustees, from volunteers, from council members. One of the main feedback was it's kind of confusing how the operations procedures are mixed into the 28E agreement. It would be really helpful if we had those separate, possibly like what we call bylaws. Solon kind of calls their operations and procedures. Is that right, Mindy? So Mindy and Eric have been working really hard to draft those and kind of untangle those procedures and things like that. So now we have a more simplified 28E agency document. We have a supplemental bylaws that talk about all of the different positions, the structure of the board, which has also changed, which I'll talk about a little bit. And we also simplified some of the terms to allow more autonomy for the board members once they're elected to come up with how they want to see that happen, or the city and trustees to come together and figure out how they want those to happen. In council, you'll see a lot of the things that are highlighted in your packet are the things that can be determined at a later time, or maybe things that the task force aren't necessarily convinced that this would be a task force decision. Maybe this is the trustees and the city decision, or to work with the fire chief and the volunteers to finalize those things. Do you all want to add anything to that?
No, that's a pretty good summary.
Okay. So what we have given the council is that separation. So we have the 28E agency agreement, and we have the bylaws. So the big changes is that in February, we talked about there being, I believe, like a 9-person board of directors. Now, we kept going back and forth in the task force, amongst the task force members, amongst the council, trying to figure out what that looks like. And I think after we talked to Solon, it was incredibly helpful to see how they operate, how they have kind of had to make it work, and getting those recommendations from the city administrator from Solon really helped us determine that, okay, we can do this and create a compromise, right? So in the old draft, there was this document that basically gave the board of directors say in almost everything, right? And I was like, me personally, I was like, do you think the volunteers would really want that, you know, because you all know what you're doing, right? The board of directors may not. We would be an oversee of financials and like checks and balances or separation of duties, but you all do the work and you know what you're doing. So do we really want that 9-member board to where the board of directors has to make all the decisions and everything? So when we talked to Solon, we really liked what they had to set up, and how they have it set up is that their fire chief really does operate the services part of it, the day-to-day services part of it. The board of directors really only make sure that the money is being spent correctly, right? And so they come together once a month, they make decisions on those big ticket items. The day-to-day bill stuff, the fire chief and the, you know, the clerk, I don't know if they have a clerk, do they, Mindy?
They do, they
Yeah.
use the city of Solon's clerk. there.
Okay, so they really work together to make sure all of that stuff is paid each month. They kind of let the fire department do what they need to do, and then the board of directors comes together to approve all of the vouchers, kind of like the council does each month, how the clerk provides us with a list of expenses. If there was any issues, the fire chief would come to the board of directors and bring those issues. So it would be, basically, it puts a lot of responsibility on the fire chief and the volunteers, but it's really not that different from what you've already been doing for the past 50 to 100 years, right? So what we did is based on that feedback, we changed it to 7 members. This is our proposal, where
That's
2,
Page 1 of the bylaws.
yep, sorry.
Make sure you reviewed it.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah.
So page 1 of the bylaws where it says organization of board members, and it is highlighted. Well, the additional parts are highlighted, but section 3, we have 7 directors. 2 selected by the city council, 2 selected by the role trustees. And then in addition to that, so that's 4, we have 3 members at large. So one of those community members we have proposed be representative of someone from the commercial sphere, someone who owns a business, either rural or in the city. Somebody who has kind of that perspective, right, as well. And again, these are all just suggestions. And then we have 1 resident from the city of West Liberty selected by the city council. And then we have 1 resident of the rural selected by the rural trustees. So you have 1 member from the trustees, 1 member from the city council, from the community. And then we have that business kind of partner that we would have to, or when I say we, I'm pretending that we're the board of directors. Sorry, I always talk like this. So that's what I mean. So that the board of directors would agree upon to bring that 3rd person in, which makes 7. Okay, now what is different is that you'll see there's no volunteers on the board this way. And, you know, this was a conversation that we've had many times, trying to go back and forth on, you know, because we want the volunteers to have a voice and we want you all to be a part of that. However, just talking with attorneys and talking with just amongst ourselves, I think this is the best way, just because it gives a lot more autonomy to the fire chief, to the volunteers to run their own ship, and minimizes the responsibility of the board of directors while still making sure that all of the checks and balances are in order. Do y'all want to add anything to that?
Well, the only thing that I would just say is our main purpose behind involving community members to serve on the board is to allow people in our community, you know, to have an opportunity to understand better about how the fire department operates and what goes into, you know, the things that we do and how many calls we respond to, and the more community members and people that are more aware of what's going on, the more they can spread that to everyone else and understand what we're doing here. So since they're paying the taxes that are funding the department, felt it was important to make sure that they had opportunity to participate in being board member.
Any questions about that, council, about the makeup, or any ideas or objections or anything? All right, so the next kind of big thing that you notice is that we took out the formula, right, Lindsay? So we took out the formula, the complicated formula to create who pays what from the rural and the city. We did this because I'm not sure it's outlined that clearly in Solon's 28E, but we did this because as a task force, I mean, we don't really care like how the city and rural figure it out as long as it's fair and equal. We just want the services to be there. We want someone to answer the phone or answer the call when someone needs help and wants to do what we have to do to make sure that you all have the support you need to answer that call. So that means that it might mean the city and the rural, and with the advisement of the chief or the EMS coordinator or what have you, will be at that table when that discussion is had. Now, in the fire chief duties and the clerk duties, we really spelled those out in this bylaws document, as well as the treasurer. So it's very clear on who does what. And in that, you'll see that it's the responsibility of the clerk and the fire chief to support each other in creating the budget each year, with the help of the treasurer, I believe. So it really outlines how things should go. And it also, I think it says that the volunteers also as an association still have your own bylaws, and that the board does not oversee anything with those bylaws, right? So you'll still have your ability to vote on things as a membership and operate in that way as well. Go ahead, Mindy.
Another thing about the cost share formula is very complicated. There are several different factors that are involved in calculating this formula. And when I went through pages upon pages of 28E agreements and the state of Iowa website, there really isn't a general consensus on the cost share formula being the way to really calculate this. So many departments do it in so many different ways. It's very clear that they're, they're entities that are making up the agency are determining what works best for them. So our thought is that the board can decide on this based on, whatever factors they feel are important. And, we as a task force would start with an initial 50-50 split or something along those lines, just until we have a base for how things are running and working, and the board could make the decision to change those calculations or how that's calculated. Our 28E agreement and the bylaws both indicate that there will be an annual budget. This will be reviewed on an annual basis. So at any point in time, it's decided that the cost allocation needs to change. It can be decided at that point.
Mm-hmm. And what's great about the agency is it's ran a lot like it's already ran, except for the rural trustees who also have tax money that's put into the operations have a say, right? So we kind of, as a city right now, we kind of oversee the financials of the funding of the department. The rural trustees will cut us a check to help support that service because they also get served by our fire department. And so this agency will really run pretty similar to how things are run now, except for when we vote on those purchases for that ambulance or that new cot or whatever, there'll be representation from the rural trustees who also provide those tax dollars to keep the services operating. Let's see, let me see what else here's in the
Could you
packet.
maybe go through, could I just
Yeah.
suggest you go through the proposal for the officers that kind of all work together for the way the finances, there's
The treasurer,
the supervisor,
Mhm.
the clerk, and the fire chief kind of all play roles
Yep.
in that. Could you maybe just walk us
Yep.
through that?
Mindy, will you take that on? Because you are so good at explaining that. And I always get the
Okay.
treasurer and the treasurer secretary, or I get them mixed up.
Okay. So to help aid us with making sure that there's appropriate separation of duties, we have a couple different positions here. The first one would be a clerk, an agency clerk position. Now, the clerk is basically going to be responsible for day-to-day accounting things, making sure that accounts payable are paid with proper approvals. They're going to document any cash that's received. And they're going to sign checks that checks for payment that for claims that are less than $1,000. They'll have some kind, at first, we're gonna need to set up a bookkeeping system, so they'll help them. This person and the treasurer would be setting up our bookkeeping and accounting software system. Doing,
Not to interject, but just to make sure that we're aware of that, the clerk position is an administrative position hired by the board.
yes,
So it's like a new position that doesn't currently exist, hired by the board.
yes.
Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sorry, go ahead.
The clerk will work with the treasurer and fire chief to develop an annual budget and basically just serve as the agency's administrative assistant. We also have a treasurer that would be a volunteer position, not a paid position. That will essentially kind of serve as providing additional oversight for the accounting duties to help keep those separation of duties. So we have one person that's going to be responsible for receiving checks, but the treasurer is actually going to take those checks to the bank so that we don't have the same person receiving money, taking it to the bank and reporting it in the system, because that's a big, that's an accounting auditor's nightmare, to put it simply. The treasurer will help with reconciling accounts, making sure that things are appropriately classified, and then also be responsible for being a signer on checks that are over 5,000. Now, before we do any check payments of 5,000 or over, it would require the approval from the board. So the board would have to approve those larger purchases. The clerk would record that the board approved it, and then the treasurer signs the check. We also have 2 signatures that are required for checks that are over a certain dollar amount. Then the treasury supervisor would be a person that sits on the board. So this would be a board member that basically will be responsible for overseeing the things that the clerk and the treasurer are signing and doing. The treasury supervisor will be responsible for opening up bank accounts and providing investment opportunities for CDs, managing that, well, with appropriate approval from the board. And essentially just helping to ensure that, there again are appropriate checks and balances with the accounts payable, accounts receivables, and, depositing of cash and checks, and making sure that things get done and our appropriate approvals are in place. The agency will also have a secretary, which essentially is also a board member, but the secretary just basically serves as someone who will write minutes for the board meetings, respond to any record requests from public records requests, and post when the meetings will be, et cetera. Although, wait, that might be clerk.
That's clerk.
Okay, that's clerk. Sorry. They'll be responsible for notifying board members
Mhm.
specifically of upcoming meetings. Sorry, that's the one I got messed up. Then, of course, we have the fire chief, and the fire chief is essentially going to be responsible for approving all payments. So any expenses or claims that come through, the fire chief has to see that and has to look at it and review what it is. And if he doesn't know what it is, he best not sign on it, because he better be finding out whether it's appropriate, because he is responsible for any check that the agency signs. He'll also meet with the clerk on a,
Yeah, I was
or
gonna say,
she.
we updated the document, so they said he or
He or
she.
she, yeah,
Yeah.
that was a good.
Good job, Dick.
correction, yeah.
Dick caught that.
Dick only suggested that.
Oldest guy on the task force.
Hey.
caught it.
And who wrote it, did not.
Correction.
Is there a dollar amount
A dollar amount of what?
on what needs to be approved by the chief? Maximum dollar amount he can approve that going to the board.
Now that I'm not sure, but the board has to approve anything over 5,000.
That's what I'm, so I would say
Yeah.
up to a 5. Up to 5.
Right.
And then chief's discretion.
And the reason we said 5 is because if it's under if it's under 5, it's going to be included in our budget. And
Right.
you're approving our budget and looking at our budget on a monthly basis, so why have you approved every single darn expense if you're already looking at things?
Right.
And, you know, with looking at a budget, you see the actual expenses and something looks funky. Board member, you can ask about that. This chief is also responsible for noting any donations or contributions and providing that to the clerk to be recorded. He's a supervisor for all paid staff and all volunteers. He will be responsible for making sure that personnel appointments are approved by the board. Hiring will be coordinated by him with assistance as needed or as applicable. He has to keep a record of all personnel, names, all that that's required by law. He will also prepare, they will also prepare a budget that will be presented to the board and approved. And again, the annual budget will have to be approved by the board before January 1st, so that it can be submitted to the respective other entities.
Then the goals, everybody have to sign off on it also.
Yes. I believe so, because
Yeah.
right. And then the last agency, and well, this would be a paid employee, would be our EMS coordinator and supervisor, administrative person. Which essentially is responsible for providing quality assurance, coordinating with our medical control, making sure that our training that is required by law is up to date, that all the paperwork for showing that we're doing our required trainings is up to date. Coordinating any other continuing education needs and filing the billing paperwork and working with the billing company to make sure that that all gets submitted and that our patient care records are being submitted and that kind of stuff. So that's essentially all of the members of, and some will serve as board members, the secretary and the treasury supervisor. And then some won't.
So the way it's written, treasury and, I'm sorry, treasury supervisor and secretary are board members.
Correct.
Members of the agency board. The clerk is a paid position, a hired position by the board, and the treasurer is a member of the volunteer fire department.
Just a
That's-
volunteer.
That's a volunteer, yeah. Okay. Is it maybe a good time to just pause and let
Yes.
council jump in with questions?
Yes,
Council,
that'd
you had a
be
chance to review all this. Fire away. What questions do you have? We won't be able to dive into, let's actually avoid diving into problem solving. I don't think that's
Yeah.
efficient for us tonight. So let's not do that, but let's, questions that you have for the task force that's been working on putting this together. If you don't understand something that's been proposed or you have a specific comment you want to bring up.
I do want to add to like. This, in reading through this again right before the meeting, it did remind me a lot of how we operate in the ambulance board. There are rural members, volunteers, we of course have volunteers, but, and then also 2 city council members. And just in the past year that I've been on it, I mean, we've had great discussions amongst each other. And, I can see this being really similar to what how the ambulance board operates.
And this would be a simplification because it does absolve that
Mhm.
board
Yep.
into a consolidated board. So
Yep.
in some ways it makes it a little simpler.
Yeah, and how this is different is those 2 city representatives would be responsible on updating the rest of the council. So the chief would not have to do any reporting to the actual city council. They would just report to the agency, and then it would be the responsibility of the city council members who are on that agency
Yeah.
to update the, kind of like how myself and was Omar, now is Ashley, would be responsible for letting you all know what we talk about on the ambulance board.
Yeah. Comments or question
I guess my only question would be, Article 4 and 5,
of the bylaw?
about the treasurer and the treasurer supervisor. Do we need to have both of those? Or can we put both of those into one and just have the treasury supervisor handle that as a whole?
So there were 2 reasons I developed that kind of oversight position. One is to make sure that we could properly segregate duties for accounting purposes. And 2 was because as a board member, I felt like that was a lot to put on one person volunteering for not only serving in a board member position, but also doing a lot of accounting work. Maybe it wouldn't end up being that much and we could just do 2. The beauty about these bylaws are they're draft and you can look at what works and put it into practice. And if you discover that it's not really needed, not necessary, the board of directors can decide to change it and adopt new bylaws that strike that article. But
Yeah.
that was kind of why, I know it's a little bit kind of convoluted. It seems like it's more detailed than it needs to be for a small organization, but I wanted to, especially just starting out, ensure that, we had plenty of opportunities to catch mistakes and correct errors in accounting before it becomes a big problem.
And for instance, in the clerk's portion, it literally says that the clerk is responsible for making sure that 28E is sent to the state. And made sure that it is filed with the state. I think there was confusion in the past since 1970 or whatever, 75, of whose responsibility it was to do that before. So that's why some things might have gone to the wayside. So this is very clear on whose responsibility it is to do what, to make sure that we don't fall back out of compliance because of a misunderstanding or something being unclear. And that's what's, like Mindy said, that's what's great about these is that the board with representation has the ability to change those things and to make it work for everyone in a better way. Yeah.
Other questions by council members?
I also thought about the treasury supervisor thing. I'm like, is it because they're so similar? Maybe they're confusing. Could it be like finance officer, treasurer, or volunteer treasurer or something, just to make it more clear? Yeah, that's all like up in the air. So those are all discussions that can be made when everything is being finalized by the trustees and the city.
All right, could you, questions by council, jump in anytime if you do, if you just have them, just go for it. You want to talk about the idea of a consultant
Mhm.
stepping into
Yep.
this?
So, and Eric, please jump in. You
Sure.
did all the legwork for trying to find the consultant. So we provided in your packet as well a proposal from CPSM, who has, if you look in the proposal, has assisted in hundreds of cities, regarding not just fire, but like emergency services, EMS, police. They've worked with a couple of cities in Iowa as well. I'm not sure where they're out of, but they are a pretty serious, kind of big time, firm that does this professionally. And, Eric, what do you want to add about that?
Just that they, they've had a lot of experience and they have a lot of consultants all throughout the United States that work on specifically arrangements and agreements between municipalities and fire departments. So when I talked to them, I felt very comfortable in their experience. And, I think normally they probably work on much bigger jobs than this. But I think, they're willing to help us out and, I think I support it, to review the documentation, just to make sure there are no gaps.
Yeah, and their proposal was very detailed, really well, put together, as well. So initially, we had thought we're just gonna have a consultant look at the 28E agreement, we're gonna have them look at the bylaws and a leasing agreement, and, just to let us know are all our ducks in a row. And I think Lee reached out and had a meeting with the consultant as well to see what other things they might be able to support us with. And it sounds like they might be able to support us with even like finalizing everything and making sure that they can maybe be as a mediator, or I don't know if you want to say more about that, Lee, but
just our discussion, if the city was to have more question, start conversation was that, just some additional checks and balances. They would provide a report, based on some data and some operations and things like that to help us better understand the agency and its operation.
So if council wanted to, you could choose to take the recommendation of this consultant and even expand the scope to make sure that you're getting input on them and for the whole picture, basically, is kind of what you're saying, if I understand it. Dana?
that's how I understand it, yeah. Any other addition to the consultant? Any questions about the consultant?
Wasn't particularly easy to find someone who could
No, out
do
of
this project.
12 different places, actually, 4 got back to me. 2 I didn't find reliable, and 2 I found reliable, and they just happened to be the ones that were on the spot, and really felt like they understood the situation and what I needed them to do.
And you're confident that they know the situation in Iowa because they work nationwide. I've done a couple in Iowa, looks like.
So I'm excited
To
to,
say, Mr. Mayor, they're also part of, the city's a part of the ICMA organization. And so
What is
they're,
ICMA? Sorry.
oh, I'll have to go for City Council Management Association. International City Council Management Association.
Okay.
It's a mouthful, but yes.
Okay.
And so the city is a member of that organization. So they're affiliated, they partner, they come highly recommended by
This consulting company is managed by.
the CPSM, that group.
the
They're,
consultant group,
yeah.
The
they're a
consultant,
consultant group.
okay, yeah.
And
which
they're-
we didn't know until we discovered that after the fact. So good job. Pretty lucky.
Skill.
Yeah.
Skill.
So
Like I
that was-
said, after
that
all
was a
this,
bonus.
you guys, task force members can set
Right.
yourselves out as
We can
consultants. while
start,
they do
we
this.
can start making you
Because
go.
It's an incredible learning process. I just got to kind of sit on the sidelines and follow along, but there's so much learning I know that went into the whole thing.
So just to better explain for council, so within our state, we go to Iowa League of Cities, there is National League of Cities. But then this would be a peer organization to the National League of Cities. So they all work under, for the government entities. So if it gives you a better understanding of where that level of organization is.
Okay.
And this isn't really related, but I know that we as a council had worked with like Pat Callahan and George Oster's name had come into it as being kind of the guru in Iowa, and Solon actually worked with George to set up their agency based on George's recommendation. So I also wanted the council to know that as well, that, it works for Solon. They're really driven on that equal representation and doing it as a partnership, and it seems like it's been working really well for them. And I do have some recommendations I wanted to go through before we wrapped up, but I wanted to keep it open for any questions and things like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, actually.
So my question is, it looks like we've received some suggested revisions from the cities. So would those be revisions that we would make before we would send it to a consultant? Or would we send it to a consultant first and then retroactively make revisions if they needed to happen?
Well, the
We've
task force,
Incorporated them already from what
well,
I,
this is something different that you guys haven't seen, I don't think.
So we haven't seen these.
okay,
No, I just got them today, but it's not a lot different. I mean, so there was recommendations for the 28E agreement that was basically just to clarify some things. So, and I think that you all, once you get to see that, will think that it's really helpful. Some things that might be.
As soon as possible.
Yep, so, I don't know what the process is there, but if the task force is able to see those recommendations, we have our attorney here too, so you can speak on it, but, the other, points that were pointed out, I went through and looked through all of them and kind of wrote some notes, and they were based on the bylaws. Couple of them, I think they were just a misunderstanding of the bylaws, so maybe those are sections that we need to clear up to make sure that it's more clear. Another portion was like in our bylaws, it talks about the volunteers kind of nominate their fire chief, they vote and elect their fire chief. The board of directors really has no say on who the fire chief is. So the recommendations was to think about how that works kind of with the board of directors who is overseeing and funding the services, that relationship with the fire chief and the appointment and things like that. Specifically, it's kind of complicated, but
So my thought about that would be, I mean, this whole conversation has been kind of a back and forth between the task force producing draft documents, which then are reviewed by our legal counsel, and then, kind of, some of that gets incorporated, some of it, the task force decided not to, right? But, kind of like taking that into account and then redrafting the document. My recommendation or my thought would be, if a consultant is gonna step in, then, just let them take a look at those recommendations as well, and just kind of try to bridge the gap there, because I feel like we end up sometimes just in sort of maybe a tug of war.
yeah, I thought the same thing when I was reading, I was like, this again. But, no, I really appreciated the recommendations you made for the 28E agreement, because they were things that we didn't catch, Mr. Haberkamp. So, I think what I'll do is I'll send the task force an email to highlight those, because maybe we do want to make those little tweaks before, we send that to the consultant, or maybe we just share what our attorney said with the consultant, like you said, Mayor. But
What were the changes that were recommended regarding the fire chief?
I will ask if I can share those or not. Specifically for the comment about the fire chief.
Would you want
oversight?
to address that? Mr. Hess?
Yeah, I can just briefly, first of all, I appreciate you allowing me to make some comments, but currently the city is involved in litigation, they're being sued, and as a result of that, I'm not at liberty to discuss things in litigation. But on the specific issue regarding the fire chief, traditionally, there has to be, the way it's written, as I understand it, it's the volunteer fire department nominates and then appoints him. Ordinarily, in a board situation, the board of directors hires and fires, whoever they appoint. So it's just a kind of a chain of command who's responsible for the hiring.
But that doesn't
in those
happen.
processes.
in all the
Pardon me?
agreements. That doesn't happen in all the agreements. And this isn't a board of directors like a corporation. The board of directors isn't appointing the fire chief. The board of directors is overseeing what the fire chief and the fire department is doing and ensuring that the funds are being spent in accordance with what the taxpayers and the city council and rural trustees approved. But the board of directors doesn't appoint the fire chief.
I understand you disagree with my legal conclusion.
Well, there we have it. I mean, that's kind of one of the things.
Yeah.
That's written like this in the draft. Legal counsel says it should be this way. So to me, I think it's a great thing for a consultant to step in and
Mhm.
say, here's typically what we'd recommend in the situation.
Well, and he's not saying it should be this way, it's another option.
Right.
By reading your comments,
No, my position is ordinarily the board of directors would be in charge of the people that they supervise, including the hiring and firing. It could be, what my comments were was, they could take into account what the fire department wants as well as prior history, but ultimately that decision would be at the board level.
Yeah, and
But
Whether
it's still the-
Whether it's at the city level now, which it is, because they're in charge of the.
Well, actually, it's not.
Well, I'm not, you asked for an explanation, I gave my explanation.
so,
Mr. Mayor, before we run out of time, I would like to hear if any of our rural trustees have some questions or comments. They've really not been given a chance to speak. So do any of our rural representatives have comments, questions?
Jerry Anderson, Wapsie Township Clerk. I say Wapsie, but in the document, it really should be Wapsie known about. So we need to put that Wapsie.
what's no not?
Thank you.
So a couple of general questions, looking through the documents today, saw there was a lease agreement for the actual facility. I didn't see anything about equipment. You guys are.
Yep,
Remember that also. And how that will be transferred to the agency. And then just a general question about the bylaws itself. I think there'd probably be good, insertion here to start. To make mention in the bylaws that these are all, the future bylaw changes, how are they gonna be handled? Will they be handled by the board itself?
it's in the
Or will
bylaws.
they be, applied by the two?
I think it's in the bylaws, Gary.
I think it's in one of the first articles where it discusses.
To take an amendment, yeah.
Okay. Okay, Article 11. Section 1. Talks about the liquid assets. Is there an estimate of the total amount that we're working with? And the genesis of that question is, we're creating a business. And one of the biggest reasons businesses fail at the start is they're not capital. So we need to know what 50% of what number we're gonna start with. And then I see it talks about current CDs and other instruments that the city holds. Are those considered in that liquid asset number that's gonna be presented? That was a question I had. Under section 11, you've got two section 2, so that's just that. But the first section 2, is that referring to, if I read it, that's how the remaining 50% is going to be handled? I think that's how I took it. want to get that squared away, and then the second section too. I'm assuming that's how the annual payments from the city will be handled.
Yeah, I think that's how we meant it to be.
This seems confusing. Section 4. But it talks about the township fund report. Are you talking a report from each individual township? Or the township's agency?
I believe from the board.
Yeah, it'd be like, when we get our annual report, it'd be reporting that sum to the agency.
So just a clarification there. Section 6, in that same article 11. There must be a reason, but why is the city going to retain a certain dollar amount to maintain a minimum balance in the bank account? And then all the money is going to be transferred over eventually to the agency. There must be a reason why that's in there. And if you guys are okay with it, I'm good. Just had a question on that. And again, are those section 7? Are those CDs included in the liquid asset number that's going to be in section 1?
So for a
And
second.
then the last question was, when we're all said and done,
Mhm.
signing, I'm assuming that we have to have signatures from West Liberty Rural Fire and the West Liberty Rural Ambulance. And the part, but it looks to me like it's all big government, but really there's like Pike Township
Yeah,
is one, so probably
we would have each township sign.
that was questions I had over lunch looking at this.
Those are great. That's great feedback. I can tell you, we talked about kind of how the transfer of funds would go, like, we kind of just brainstormed of, well, I mean, it would be wise for the city and the rural to keep some money back for emergencies, to build up, if there's any unexpected costs, things like that. But again, this is all things that can be handled, once. One of my recommendations I have in there is to maybe appoint a board elect from the trustees from the city, so they can kind of hash out all of these final details and make a transition plan together. So they know exactly what that plan is, what funds are going to be transferred and how. And so those board members could kind of be like the task force, except for we're not the board, right? Those board members would actually really lay that final foundation of this is how we want it to be done, and they would continue to serve as those board members for the first year or 3.
Yeah, trying to ease the transition.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
I like that.
The last thing, my view,
Mhm.
my life that have been out in the country, if the fire department and the EMS want to elect their own fire chief,
Mhm.
that's the way I want it. I want them to elect the person that they're most comfortable with being their leader. And, you know, legal advice is one thing, but in the real world, I want them to elect and appoint their.
Yeah, and I do agree with you, but I think, let me break this apart a little bit. I think what the question is that in the bylaws, it says the volunteers can also dismiss their fire chief if they feel like anything unethical is going on, if the volunteers feel, just like you would now, right? That's how you all do it now. If you feel like the fire chief wasn't doing their due diligence and wasn't managing things correctly, you can all dismiss the fire chief. So that's how it's written in the bylaws. I think that what a couple of the task members' concerns were, and maybe the mayor, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but okay, so what if on our, and when I say our, I mean the board, what if the board of directors is seeing some things that they're not quite agreeing with, or, and I'm not talking about our current fire chief, I'm talking, even if this is 20 years from now, there's just, the relationship there is not happening, and there's no way to take corrective action. There's no, what does the board do to try to solve those issues? If it's specifically with the fire chief, if all of that goes onto the volunteers, I mean, that's just a conversation to have. There could be a line in there that says, if the board of directors wants to speak with the volunteers, they have the right to call a meeting with the volunteers and talk about their issues with the fire chief. You know, and that could be maybe what just needs to be done. I mean, I think that's where it is how does the board of directors talk about their issues with the volunteers if they have that responsibility to, you know, hire and fire their fire chief. But I mean, I don't want to speak for the attorney. That's where what I would like to see happen, just for some accountability on all sides that everybody's comfortable with. I too think that the volunteers know best who their fire chief needs to be, and the board of directors probably doesn't.
But yet,
So.
they don't want to put, and Mr. Haverkamp, please correct me if I'm wrong on this. You don't want to give the fire department equal representation on the board as voting members. But yet, the board wants to be able to control whether they terminate the fire chief or not. To me, that's not fair.
Mhm. Yeah.
If you want to have the board control the fire chief, then the fire department should have equal representation on the board like the original proposal. That's my opinion. I don't know if that's,
So there's still one point that, yeah,
Mhm.
needs to be
I mean,
worked out.
do you have an opinion on that? I would love to hear it if you did.
Traditionally, fire departments do not serve on the, volunteer fire departments do not serve on the board. Are there more than one ways to address that issue? Potentially, which is one of the reasons why a good expert consultant might be able to assist in those thorny issues. What I'm hearing is some people absolutely want the volunteer fire department to pick their own chief. They may have some alternatives to what my proposal was to the council, which was that the board of directors should have absolute authority.
So if you have the board of directors have absolute authority, do you think that the fire department volunteers should have representation on the board?
No, I've said before that I don't.
You don't agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I just, when I read it, I thought it sounded just like how a school board is run. Like that was what made sense to me in my brain. So like, you don't have teachers on the school board, but and technically the school board is the one that like signs my contract. But my principal is the one that hired me. Like my principal did all the interviews, and my principal said, I want Ashley to be the band teacher. And then it went to the school board meeting, and the school board was like, okay, that's who you want. Cool. And then I got my contract. So
That's
that was
exactly right.
kind of
actually.
that's what I thought it meant when I read it. And to me, that made sense because you don't have teachers on the school board, but they're just people that live there, but your principal's the one hiring and firing them.
And the principal is the one that is at the school every day, that knows what the school needs, that knows how to operate the school. So the school board really has to rely on that principal to provide them accurate, guidance, really. And that's how I would personally like to see the new agency, is that they really can trust and rely on the fire chief to bring them what is needed to make the right decisions.
Absolutely. And I agree with that too. The way the school board works, I think the way I see it is ultimately the decision goes back to an elected board, right? So that the taxpayer dollars go back to a group of elected people. That's where it, 99.99999 times is never going to ever be any kind of issue. But ultimately the decision, if the school board wanted to fire you, they could.
Right, but Jay
So-
Burrows was like, nah, get out. He could, but like, it's not,
Right.
doesn't, they'd have to have a whole paper trail and all kinds of things.
Just in order to have that complete taxpayer representation, I think that's why you typically do it that way. That's my
Yep.
understanding. I'd like to ask again if there are other questions by rural trustees. Want to make sure that we hear those if there are. Members of the volunteer fire department or EMS? Any questions about any of this, comments?
I would just like to say. Legalities, whatever, but. The firefighters know. Whether the chief. Is up and able for the job, and if he's not. We do something about it. Now, if you. Had a. Let's say the board hires somebody from Cucamonga and they come in. And we don't like what they're doing, you may not have a fire department. I'm just saying that could happen. I'm not saying that we'd walk out or anything like that, but. You know, the volunteers. And I've been on 40 years and we've. You know, got our chief through the members voting and it's worked.
You never want the board to say, here's what you get, in other words. Right?
It continues to work.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you know, we're a family, you're a family. And we know what works for us. And how it works. And we work together as a team and, you know, if there's a flaw, we work it out amongst ourselves.
Makes sense. Yep, absolutely.
I
Thank you.
I just wanna add to God's statement real quick. The fire chief is more than just a person who signs bills, signs checks. All these people who volunteer to go into burning buildings, put their life on the line with that person at their home. So if that person says, fire chief says, go in the burning building, get out of there, go do this, go do interior attack, exterior attack. It's somebody that they trust, they elected to be in that position. So it's more than just someone who signs checks, somebody who answers to city council or answers to the board or answers to whoever comes in and files a complaint. It's the members choosing that I trust my life in this person's hands to make the right decision when that time comes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to thank the board for the work that they've done these last 11 months. I know that it's not been an easy ordeal, and I appreciate the time and effort that's been done. So thank you all. Maybe that's what I'm saying, the entire task force, they've done a lot of work on this, saving everybody.
Here, Mr. Reed.
Just want to recap something Ashley said in regards to the board and teachers and all that. The teachers are paid, so I can see why they would be employed, volunteers on. Okay, so there's a huge difference between the board. My second one is when it comes to the attorney, is he the decision maker for the city, or is it the city the decision maker for the city? So I get that he's giving legal advice, but to me, it seems like he's giving orders and you guys are following. That's what it seems like to me.
Thank you. Other comments or questions?
Yeah, I know we're about out of time, but I've
Oh,
got
that's
just a
good.
couple.
Yeah.
So we've been at this for a long time. We've established that it's possible, it's legal, it's feasible. You know, someone has shown us that and you all have had the opportunity to speak to them. This gives all parties involved equal representation, which was, I think, one of the biggest issues that, you know, was brought up. Litigation aside, I think there are some things that impact that, but if this goes into place, there's some concessions being made there too. You know, to me, and again, this has been a long road, but it really seriously is a win-win for everybody. It's a win for the rural. It's a win for the city and the city council. It's a win for the members of our communities. You know, they're gonna get the fire and EMS protection that they need and they deserve, administrated by people who know how to do it. And, you know, I just asked all of the council, because it's kind of in your hands to, you know, make the decision and move forward with this or not. You know, think about that. Think about all the volunteers here that serve this community. And again, I just go back to nobody loses in this. Everyone benefits. So in my opinion, it should move forward.
And that means send it to the consultant people, is that what we're, like, do we vote on that today, or like, how's that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, to me, I think that's the next step.
I thought we already did.
Yeah, we've already sent documents that we said we would send during the task force meeting
Oh, okay.
to the consultant. We're waiting to hear their response or,
But
recommendation.
you didn't send the latest.
We did not send the latest advice from the attorney that was received today. But the proposal says it could be up to 90 days. We're hoping to get it sooner because it's not as big a job as what, they're typically used to.
Yeah.
And we kind of condensed it down a little bit to really have them focus on those documents.
Okay.
So hopefully we'll have some kind of response from them. soon.
Report.
So you're, just to clarify that, are you saying who's we? That's the fire department? Did you sign the contract with them then?
No, the task force.
The task force sent, Eric on behalf of the task force
Yeah.
sent the documents.
Gentleman Joe, asked for if there was any documentation that could help get going. And so, as the decision we made at the task force meeting was to provide him with that.
Okay.
Which I thought we discussed at the last council meeting about this.
We haven't even.
Yeah, we haven't officially decided. I don't think you have officially decided anything involving the consultant, but in any case, we'll catch up to that. We can review that. And I think like the discussion has been that you've identified a consultant, and I think, your very first question, the last time that this came up in the council meeting was, so has this been reviewed by a professional, right? So I know that that's, something that's going to give the council a lot of reassurance once we see that. So I anticipate, I think kind of based on what you were saying, that council may want to even expand some of that scope and really let them review whatever you want them to.
Yeah.
And that's a good next step.
Yeah, so currently the association has voted to pay up to $7,800 for the services. If there's additional services that Lee has talked with Mr.
Well,
Pasquio.
and to me, it's a little bit of a conflict of interest too, if we're
Yeah.
both going at him. Because I don't want whatever you're doing, which is fine, to impact these documents that I need him to look at.
Yeah,
So whatever the city wants to do with consultant, that's fine. But, this is what's first and foremost that we need to get.
yeah, because what we really need to hear back is if there's an item on there, and a lot of it might be the similar responses that Attorney Haverkamp has that, if there's an item on there about insurance or something like that, that's what we want the consultant to say, hey, we need to figure and be more clear about the insurance or whatever it is, that's really what we need the consultant to do, is to say, before you put this into effect, these are the things that you're missing, or these are the things you need to clarify in detail. So we have that professional perspective, we have the perspective of the attorney. We would hope that the county or the trustees attorney would also look at all the items, so that we can put this in the bag and vote on something. Did you have something to
So
say?
the discussion with the consultant is a part of consulting is when they're reviewing an agreement, they have to have the parties that are entering into the agreement, there is a conversation. As he had explained, there's gonna be more information, most likely that he's gonna have to collect. In the process, he said that those entities that are entering into the agreement, if they want to identify additional concerns as he's going through this, then he would want to have that information. So
Sure, I
because-
understand that.
yeah.
And he
And
did
so-
say he wanted to work closely with the volunteers through the program.
And did he reach out to you or did you reach out to him?
I reached out to him.
Okay.
Yep.
And that was per my direction from council.
Yep, and so is there any other,
Is that a blind here tonight or not? I mean, I love a second opinion, but I think that's the right thing you guys did. It's not about it. Obviously, we have one, but something wrong with the second.
Mhm.
And I think, like you said, you mentioned like his points, that he's coming back the same way from the before. I think we're fine and do that, I feel like people are a little uneasy with the decision, but And why,
With what decision, Omar?
moving forward with the consultant, I just, like, I just help.
I'm not.
I'm not saying you, I'm not saying you, I'm just saying I, in the air, I kind of feel, but I just said, I think that's the right way to move forward. With going to the someone to get a second opinion, obviously, since they've done.
Yeah.
With other.
And it,
Makes sense.
yeah, because I want to go through the recommendations really
Oh,
quick,
yeah, go ahead.
Mayor, but if there's
Please do.
other comments or anything or
We still have 15 minutes.
need for clarification,
I think.
I should have numbered these.
When you say recommendations, is that like back on the timeline that we were talking about?
Yep, after it says Dear City Council.
You got it.
Yep. After the packet contents, there's a section on that says recommendations. So here is what I created, and I sent it over to the task force and said, take a look and see what you guys all think. I don't think I got any feedback really. But here are kind of the very broad recommendations that hopefully this is the last, work session that we'll need before we can wrap things up in a couple months or after the consultant provides feedback. But here is what I've written down. Please feel free to add members if you want to add anything. So it's important to note, and we've kind of said this, that once the 20 AE agency is established and submitted to the state, amendments are easy and they're encouraged. It's super easy to make an amendment to your 20 AE agreement. So it seems kind of scary that these are legal documents, they're set in stone, but it's very easy for a board to make an amendment to their bylaws or their agreements. So don't let that scare anybody into, this is how it's gonna be and this is it. I think it'll probably change and should change as time changes to better serve the community and the volunteers who are providing the service. So an agreed upon comprehensive transition plan will need to be created. That's the second recommendation. It may be useful to seek out and appoint the agency board members who can be considered board elect. Members who can then work together in conjunction with the fire chief and the current staff and volunteers to finalize the bylaws, create a transition plan for the city and the role board to review and approve. Okay. The other recommendation, actually, it's just kind of an opinion, I think, at this point of everybody, but the litigation must cease, right? So in order to appropriately move forward from this point, the next step is to end the legal dispute between the two public entities. The task force proven over the last year that it's possible to put aside differences and work together to create something good over a common goal. Like, we have very different opinions, yet we have met over 20 times in the last 11 months to figure this out together. And it wasn't easy for a lot of our task members has been going through a lot of personal things as well, that it was really hard to show up, but they continue to show up because we all love this community and we know that this community deserves the wonderful volunteers to show up and answer those calls and get that protection that they need. And those volunteers also deserve to be supported and feel supported and loved by their community as well. That's all something that we agree upon. So, I mean, we've proven that we can come together and work together. So we hope that the details within the documents can be used as a catalyst to begin the important discussions necessary between the disputing parties so that they can come together and envision and then work out the last few details necessary to finalize the new partnership. And then the last recommendation, or maybe the second to last, I might be missing a page. Reach out to Solon about how their agency has worked for them.
Need your last page.
I think I do. Thank you, Mayor. So the city of Solon City Administrator has been a valuable resource in helping the task force visualize how actions could be taken by a city during the transition period. And you'll see in the packet, I included in the packet the kind of summary of when Mindy had interviewed the city administrator about their whole process. One thing that I really loved is that I found out that it took them over a year. I was like, oh, thank goodness, and like somebody said earlier, they didn't even have, the contention that we've had at the very beginning, and it took them for over a year to do this. So I love that we didn't quit, that we kept going and that we're on the right track and hopefully it will turn into something like it has for Solon that works best for everybody. But yeah, reach out to Cammie Rasmussen. She was really, really helpful and open to providing that feedback. Council members, if you have questions that you're not comfortable asking, in the open, just send her an email, ask her about how that relationship works or how, you want to get some feedback on some of your concerns and things like that. And the task force recommends that the council read the document, if you haven't already, that where we describe the city administrator's feedback, and to reach out if more questions are come up. And then lastly, we recommend to invite the fire chief to be a part of the conversation. So the new recommendations put forth in the proposed agency bylaws instill much of the responsibility of maintaining operations and services to the fire chief. The West Liberty Fire and EMS volunteers have operated for over 100 years, can provide much insight to the council and the rural trustees on how meticulous and intentional operations must be executed to meet all the state certifications and standards. They really do know what they're doing, and they've been doing it for a long time. So invite the fire chief to those conversations and to that table. As a task force, we've learned that frankly, there is much to learn from each other. You don't know what you don't know. And we recommend inviting all three entities, meaning the volunteers, the rural and the city, to one meeting to hear out about all of the finite details involved in running the fire department, presented by maybe the fire chief and volunteers. And this may provide some clarity and reestablish trust in the capability to manage those day-to-day operations of fire and EMS services. This will also provide an opportunity for the fire chief and volunteers to be recognized for all that they do for their services and sacrifice to our shared communities. I learned the most when I spent time at the fire station, went on calls, just heard the stories from Paul, from my fiance, from him running to 100 plus, just it's a really huge operation that people have to be very, very dedicated into making sure it's successful. And we have an amazing volunteer squad and fire chief, in my opinion. So I think their voices are invaluable to this whole process.
Here.
Yeah. All right, anything else by the task force that you want to add? That's all I, yeah.
So when we get stuff back from the consulting company, can we arrange another board session?
Could be. Let's see how that goes. I'm not quite sure what it's gonna look like, but I don't know, to be honest.
I think
It makes sense, maybe.
right, I think it'd be nice just to see what they say back.
Right.
Then we let task force do.
Talk about it all together.
and come back.
Great. All right, I think we'll call it there tonight. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you again to the rural trustees for being here. Thank you to the, thank you, Kirk, Mr. Chief Sickles. And appreciate you being here, and to all the members of the volunteer firefighters and EMS. Really appreciate what you guys do. You really are heroes in the community, and thank you for that. Thank you, City Council. I guess we're not gonna adjourn, are we?
It's 7:25.
All right, adjourn, it's on our same agenda.
You can just.
Yeah, we'll just take a break.
Yeah.
We'll end here and take a 5-minute. We'll call the room to order. The meeting is already officially called to order. I'll just announce again, it is June 6th, 2023. We will now begin the regular city council meeting for the city of West Liberty. And for a roll call, we have tonight Mayor Pro-Tem Cara McFerren and city council members Dana Dominguez, Ashley Smith, Josh Schiltz, and Omar Martinez. We also have with us tonight city manager Geertz and interim city clerk Shari Hoffert. Did you like how I emphasized that? The last time I'll say interim. I will accept a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve agenda?
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All those in favor, any discussion of the agenda? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries 5-0. We will begin right away with the oath of office for soon to be city clerk, Shari Hoffert. Do I do the resolution and then the oath? That would make sense, I guess. Is there a motion we have a resolution in front of us to appoint Shari Hoffert as the city clerk? Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve. Resolution.
Moved and seconded to approve this resolution. Is there any discussion? It's a roll call vote. Councilmember McFerren,
Yes.
Councilmember Dominguez.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yep.
Councilmember Schiltz.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinez.
Yes.
The motion carries 5-0. And want to come on up, Shari? We're gonna do this right in front of the flags, right behind us. Thanks.
You want me to bring my paper too?
Cara, it's up to you if you'd like, if you'd like it, yes. Sure. Yep, raise your right hand. I'll just repeat a short phrase. I have a little bit of practice doing this now. I, Shari Hoffert,
I, Shari Hoffert,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and that I will faithfully and impartially,
and that I will faithfully and impartially,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
discharge all duties
discharge all duties
of the office of city clerk
of the office of city clerk
of the city of West Liberty, Iowa,
of the city of West Liberty, Iowa,
as now or hereafter required by law.
as now or hereafter required by law.
Congratulations. Yeah.
You
Yes.
guys come up here.
Family members who want a picture here in front of the flag, come on up. Although I should warn you, if you cross a certain line, you automatically go on the ballot to be a city councilman.
Watch out.
Oh,
Jackie Tompkins, 24.
Yes. Bailey. And maybe.
your family.
You guys are so adorable.
So cute. All right.
Maybe I'll get it from me, so that makes sense.
Very proud of you.
Oh, I got this, getting the whole shirt off. It's like, what's you doing there? You're gonna hold my folder. Folder.
One more.
Good job, girls.
All right.
We got fun smiles and we got.
Thank you, guys.
One more stuff. Good job, guys.
See you guys.
Family. No. More
I
pictures.
can tell.
Because you both are.
Yay.
And so proud. All right, thank you guys.
Yeah.
I think we will rounding around. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's.
That's Clerk Shari now, Eva.
You should make it call you.
From now on, that's how it will be addressed.
Well, congratulations. But everyone is happy, and I'm sure you're happy to have it official.
I am, yes. I'm very grateful. Thank you.
The Windsor City Manager, very, very proud.
You have served at City Hall now for
Almost 6 years. Yep, almost 6 years, and I've been in the deputy clerk position for just over 3.
Great. Excellent. Okay, we'll move on to approval of the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve consent agenda.
Second.
It's moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? This is the city council meeting minutes from our two last meetings, one a special meeting for a budget amendment. If no discussion, it's a consent vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries 5-0. A beer and liquor license for Casey's General Store. Is there a motion to approve?
Make motion.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve. Keith Worthing, anything we need to know about Casey's regarding alcohol sales? No issues. Okay, any questions by council? Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries 5-0. Looking at reports, I'd like to start with our city engineer, Leo Foley.
Thank you. Okay, so the east side drainage, last time I talked to you, I told you our modeling was about complete. It is done now. We are finding that the problems that you see all the time, we were able to model pretty well. We're struggling modeling, how do we resolve them to SUDAS standards? Because you've got an old system, so you've got pipes down the line that are, smaller than what need to be. So we can maybe get the water off the street, but then it's gonna back up to the pipe. So we're not ready to present to you yet, but that's what we're trying to fight through right now. Where do we go from here? But we've got a couple of alternatives on mind, but we haven't, nothing we've circled the wagons and said we're ready to present. Hopefully in next month. Next one is well number 2. Both contracts now are in our hands. For some reason, they were both a little slow getting the contracts, bonds, and insurance back to us, but they have got them back. So now we've reviewed them. They look good. We send them over. You guys have already approved them. They get signed and we're on all right. Okay. Next one is Naughty Circle. We are, I'd say 80% done with actually Naughty Circle. We have provided the city manager and the streets department, Adam, the kind of a preliminary plan, and our cost estimate is higher than what we thought. So right now we're concentrating on finishing Naughty Circle and then giving you some alternatives, to either delay on the next street or come up with some extra money, or maybe even look at a different type of plan. Our original plan, when we just put a capital improvement together, was just to overlay. As our engineers started looking at it, they're saying overlay doesn't look good. The last 5 years or whatever have really done some damage to the street, and that they think it ought to be milled, at least milled off 2 or 3 inches and put that back to make it better. So we've got some plans. We haven't settled on that yet. We've given the city one update, but we probably need to give them some more information. Moving forward. Next one is Rainbow and Maxon, and I think that's on your agenda for a pay estimate and change order, and I'll talk about it when we get there. That's all I had tonight.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have city staff reports. Are there questions by council specifically about any of these reports that we have?
Mr. Mayor, I'd just add that, you had a placeholder for the city manager's report, and, just from I'm gonna give you a verbal, and I'll make sure that we have a written one at the next meeting. Currently, it's been very busy in our office. We've had, Councilmember McFerren has sat in with us on a couple of development discussions. So we've been meeting with the developers and going over mainly utility and utility costs. We work with the city's electrical BHMG. We've sent off some more information to BHMG. They've returned some information to us this week, so we'll be following back up with a couple of the developments. Along with that, as Leo has said, we've been talking very often about the things that he's mentioned, looking at some fiscal things, but working all together and staying in contact over those things. From an administration piece of it, Shari and I have been working diligently every day, transferring items from the clerk's role, separating out, working with job descriptions, working with evaluations. Been meeting with supervisors, going over that information. We reviewed the employee handbook. I received all the feedback. It's ready to go to a new draft to be sent off to our attorneys. I reviewed emergency disaster recovery plans. I have a couple samples. I really need to get council committee meetings going. And I've sent a couple of emails, and so I guess coming into June here, I really would like to review those. I have a couple that I haven't had follow-up from, so I thought maybe the first part of June would be better time for some of you. So I'll send some emails out again to set those committees, because we have a public safety that deals with some signage, some parking issues. But the employee policy committee has met, we went through some things, and you have some things on your agenda tonight that we'll be going through from that meeting. So if you have any other questions, please let me know, but I will get that all identified in a report for you for the next meeting, so I apologize.
Great, thank you.
I have a question about the electric report. I just, over the last month, it seems like we had a few like power outages where the weather like wasn't bad. Is there anything we need to know in terms of is it just a lot of squirrels and a lot of transformers, or like?
They primarily have all been squirrels. I did follow up with the electric superintendent. They've been busy. Okay, squirrels as they are. And some of them were outdated equipment. Sure. That also caused some issues that they will be on. So yeah, cool. Thanks.
I've been quite a few. Is there, I guess Mr. Chivers isn't here tonight, but.
He's always on.
Yeah. You know, could we, Mr. Chivers, would you care to just kind of share your thoughts about that? I mean, I know it's definitely been a topic of conversation with a lot of outages recently.
Yeah, we've had 6 outages last month. 3 of them were from squirrels, 2 of them were from broken switches, and 1 was from lightning. So that's pretty much it. And the squirrels you're not going to be able to do anything with. And the switches are just outdated equipment that we have to replace when it goes bad. So
That's something where you typically wait for it to fail and then.
no, not typically, but it's on our next year's plan to start updating our cutout switches. But like I said, we only have so many people and so much time. So.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
Question for Chief Worthy. When are you gonna decide what details you're gonna put on your interceptor?
So the pictures that I provided, when I had spoken to the council about approaching the high school art teacher, that was kind of the final drafts. So I sat down with the officers and we reviewed those drafts, and there were pieces of different ones that we liked. But I think the next step is sitting with either the art teacher again to get maybe a final draft to submit, or sitting down with Cardinal Sign and Graphics to say, can we have them look at the pictures that we submitted, tell them the pieces we like, come up with a draft. I don't know what the easiest next step is, so that's something that we'll have to, when we have time, get together and discuss. But I wanted to show everybody and showcase what the students submitted.
Yeah, some cool designs in here.
Agreed.
And if I can share with council, Chief has the vehicle,
Oh, yeah. This is, been put out for bid. I think we've got 4 sealed bids so far. I think that's started again tonight to a new interested person.
So people put in private.
Yep, sealed bids. So we have envelopes with, I'm hoping there are bids in there, because that's what it says in there. But we've gotten 4 so far, and I just showed it tonight at 6:30.
And it ends on Thursday. So on the 8th, yeah, we posted it 2 weeks ago.
And then once they go through that bid and open the seal, then they'll present to council the next meeting for the acceptance of that bid.
Okay.
And Chief Whirling, I'm curious here about semi trailers on Freedom Street.
Yes.
Being stored there, so it says continuing work with them. With it, I'm assuming these are the businesses around the area.
So the last time when I was out there and spent a couple of hours, there were several that were going in, they're all either going in to JRs to get service, and other businesses have seen them park there and assumed that they can just park theirs there as well. So we had JV Hunt, West Liberty Foods, and then there were 2 that were other privately owned ones. One of them thought they could store it there, and the other one was waiting to get service from JR's. JR's declined to do service and they just never moved it. So I've been working with JV Fund, working with West Liberty Foods, working with JR's to find a way to keep Freedom Street open. Because I want West Liberty to grow. I want the businesses out there to grow, like Liberty Park. We want people in there, and having a whole bunch of trailers lined up isn't the best way to do it.
Are they
So they've
working
been,
well with you and taking?
yes, everybody's been very receptive to it. When I went out of town to Muscatine, I think it was last Friday, but there was only one there. And the day that I was really working hard, I think there were 8. So, and JR's has been working on emptying their lot to start putting the trailers in the lot to get work done rather than parking them down Freedom Street. And part of, when the city manager mentioned, the public safety committee signage on Freedom Street, I would love to put signage up there that officially says there is no parking here. So that it's more enforceable. Right now, I'm asking them to move, and everybody's been very receptive to do so, but there's technically no signage on Freedom Street right now.
And should there be signage eventually, then that becomes definitely more enforceable.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, but everybody's been very receptive about trying to keep that clear for us, and they've been doing a good job. Like I said, the last time I was out there, I only saw one. So,
Someone want to say, we these packets, very nice. A lot of information and a lot of things going, so. Keep on trucking.
Any other department heads or anybody who submitted a report would like to share anything? Okay. Any other questions by council? Hearing none, we'll move on. I usually just move on. Do you want to receive and file these, or is it, it's okay, just move on? Okay.
I'm
Committee,
sorry, let me
committee
ask-
meetings, we have.
Let me ask the clerk.
You are fine, you can just move on.
We'll have a stay hard. Fire and EMS task force, we just had a work session about that. Councilmember Dominguez, do you want to touch on that for anyone who wasn't here, or we good there?
I'm good.
Moving forward, employee committee. Does anybody from the employee committee want to give us a report on that meeting? That's kind of an important meeting.
We went over so much.
Yeah.
Remember, we went, I mean, we looked at lots of job descriptions. And
Basically, the idea is City Hall is going through a huge overhaul of what it amounts to.
Yes.
I mean, every role at City Hall has shifted. I think I'm right. Every single role. So,
And it needed updating
yeah,
for today's environment. It needed updating for the leadership structure. So we were able to start rolling on that and getting it more, refined and.
Yep, and city clerk Hoffert did a wonderful job kind of separating out the duties so they're more clear for each position and more clear and defined. So we reviewed a chart that would kind of see what those positions would detail, which I think would be great for the staff. So their expectations are a lot more clear and defined. And then we also looked at, we talked about staffing for EMS, kind of some discrepancies, or not discrepancies, just kind of like a little speed bump that we hit because they have 24-hour staffing. The payroll was getting kind of funky when somebody would work on the weekends for a 24-hour shift. It would be essentially on another
Week pay period.
yeah, week
So
pay period.
it would cut that pay period in half, basically.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, or it would give them overtime, right? So we kind of discussed on what are some options to do there, and I think.
And I
We're-
followed up with the Department of Labor, so he had sent me a bunch of documentation that I will go over, and then Lee and I will meet with Fire and EMS again, once we have gone over everything and are able to establish the way that it can work to fit their schedule.
We did meet with the fire chief and the assistant chief and the EMS coordinator, and we talked through that, and we agreed to work through it, and just as the clerk said, she reached out and
So
I think it's to get some more information, so we can continue to.
I'm sure we're not the first community who's dealt with that, so there must be some resources, it sounds like.
There are a ton, and I actually spoke to multiple different people and finally got in contact with one of the investigators, and so he's been helping me, walking me through the last couple of weeks so that we can get things put in place. So.
Sounds good. Any other questions by council?
Can you think of it, something else that we might have?
So we discussed 12-hour shifts, which you'll see on your agenda tonight, yeah, and we just discussed that we'll be following back through with some additional job descriptions and updates to that, and then talking about performance evaluation, employee handbook, and updating that, so.
Thank you, committee members, for taking away extra meetings. Okay, if there's no other things to add about reports, we'll go on to vendor voucher claims. Is there a motion to approve vendor voucher claims with number 1 in the amount of $1,856,922.89?
Motion to approve vendor vouchers number 1.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve. Any questions, discussion?
The larger part of your claims are your annual or your semi-annual bond and interest payments.
This is a big one.
Yeah, those are, so June 1 is when principal and interest are due on all bonds with the exception of electric. That one's due in December 1 with principal and interest only due. And then your you have your state revolving fund that is also due, and that's on the sewer revenue.
Any other questions on any of these items? Okay, all those in favor say aye. I should say we have a motion to approve, and all those, we heard the ayes, all opposed say no. Motion carries 5-0, and we have vendor voucher claims list number 2 in the amount of $664. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion.
Second. Moved and seconded to approve. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries 5-0. You
I
have
abstain.
one abstention. I'm sorry. The motion carries 4-0 with Councilmember McFerren abstaining. Item 7C is new, vendor voucher claims list for the library. Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve. Can I ask City Hall just for an understanding of why we're adding this one?
So typically it's added on your normal claims list, but this came in separately and during training, it was already built into the system. That's the only reason it's separate now. Typically you will have it included in your main claims list, and
Okay.
at the bottom is prepaid library claims.
Gotcha.
This time, because it was already created, we just separated it out.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Any questions?
You think it's better to leave it separated?
Do you think it's better to leave it separated, Councilmember?
They're
Martinez.
prepaid by the library or pre-approved by the library board.
Right,
That is what the library board does most of the time is approve the bills.
Gotcha.
I'm just saying if it's okay if we do it like this.
Yeah, so it would be itemized like that. It's just typically at the bottom of your normal claims list, and then it will say library prepaid claims list. But due to the way that it was processed this time with them coming in first, there was already a department register created for it, so it's separated out.
So normally that's all consolidated into one line on the
Yeah.
bottom, basically.
So all of it will be broken out like
Oh,
that,
yeah.
but it
But
will be down at the
within-
bottom.
yeah,
within
within
the
the-
claims list.
Regular vendor
Yep,
vouchers.
correct. Like on your regular vendor vouchers, you would have your vendor vouchers that we're paying, your prepaid items, and then your library prepaid items on there.
Okay.
And can I ask who the first and second was on that?
I don't remember. Omar and Cara. Yeah,
Martinez and
seconded.
McFerren? Okay, that's okay. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries 5-0. Public comments and correspondence. Is there anyone in the room tonight with a public comment or? Yes, comments shared. City Council, have you heard anything, Councilmember Schiltz?
No.
Nothing on McFerren?
I have a couple of things.
Okay.
I received some communications from an individual here in town that lives right downtown, and he says he's witnessing some out-of-town entities dumping in our city dumpsters. So he wanted to just bring that up as a way to maybe have it checked or put some cameras or something, but he says this is an ongoing issue. So
they're out of town.
I think he's, I don't know. He says the vehicles that are driving by, indicate they're from other counties. So I guess, I don't know, it's a matter for, I guess, to look into. But he says they're out of town, people, or he maybe, I don't know if he knows them and he's witnessing them dump garbage in the dumpsters.
You're talking about private dumpsters, businesses, dumpsters?
It's the ones behind, on the alley, or is that a street behind the 3rd Street, on the south side? Yeah. And between the railroad tracks and the back.
By like Jan's, where
Yes,
Jan's used to
behind,
be.
yeah, behind it. Behind
Are
there.
there recycling dumpsters there? Is that what they're talking about?
No, we have individuals that not, sometimes they don't even put things in the dumpsters, they'll set them outside of the dumpsters.
Yeah.
They also dump along Cheeseboro. And again, just a reminder, we do have cameras, the cameras are due to be going up, I believe, when I spoke with Nick, we should have them in the next few weeks, and so we will be able to put those up, and there are some places you can, hopefully we can do some identify what we recommended to property owners or business owners for their own is if they wanted to put up a camera, and if they are able to get the vehicle or able to identify it or get a license plate number to, they can come to the police department and file that, to as, discharging their trash or whatever they have. But yeah, we've had that. I don't think it's this time of the year, it kind of, it jumps up there, but it's tires, it's furniture, it's
Yeah.
TVs, things of that.
Everybody who has a private dumpster knows it's such a problem.
Yeah. Mattresses, so,
Because it does cost us quite a bit.
so I would just,
Dump
yeah,
appliances and TVs, as we just witnessed in the vendor vouchers claims list that was on there when we dumped.
we just recommend that if they can get a license plate or, something to that nature that they could provide. And file that with the police department.
Okay, and then the second thing I have is, somebody from the Heritage Foundation reached out to me and said that, they're still getting multiple complaints that from, I don't know if he's getting them from City Hall or from pedestrians in the community about the trees down on the trail. And that the trail is the property of the Heritage Foundation. The trail is not city property, city-owned property. So I wanted to make that clear for everybody that watches this, that the Heritage Trail or this trail up from the depot to Highway 6 is not city property. It is private property run and managed and owned by the Heritage Foundation here in West Liberty, and they are the ones responsible for any cleanup, maintenance, all of that. And they apparently have a lot of trees down.
Yes.
Or trees that fell on property owners' property and other property owners. And so they are trying to manage picking up those trees as fast as they can, but there's, I guess, quite a bit. So it sounds like it's kind of more than what their select membership can do. So they're looking at ways that they can get a firm in, a company in to go through, sweep through and pick up those trees. So they're trying to figure that out right now.
I would just add on to that as far as correspondence, Mr. McFerren reached out to me as on behalf of the Heritage, And our city staff have a number of staff members. I have 2 superintendents that have followed back up, and they're working with the Heritage Foundation group to organize a cleanup. So our city staff is willing to go, they're gonna step up and help out with that to get some cleanup done. And so just as you said, it's not city property, but however, the city crews are gonna help out, so the Heritage, because it is a big task. And we did talk about the disaster recovery, looking at additional funding for them, with the help for assistance for some cleanup, so. Thank you for mentioning.
But those are the 2 things I have at this
Great.
time.
Thank you.
I talked to a contractor and property owner who's renovating a building on East Third Street, and they were talking about how long it's taking to get electrical connected to their building. They said that Terry released the meters 16 days ago, and they still have not been connected. They said that in Iowa City, for example, like Mid-American, if you ask them to bury your lines, they'll do it and they'll connect you within a couple of days. And here, not only did the contractor have to bury the lines, but they still seem to not be able to get connected. And they said they've checked in with City Hall and it seems like everything's in order and they've paid all their things, and it's just taken a really long time to get that building connected. So I just said I will mention it and check into it.
I assume you'll follow up on that.
We've had discussions with regards to that, and it's my understanding that there was additional things that needed to be met that wasn't, and we worked with the building inspector on that. And I'll ask her, but we did have it was signed off. We did have a sheet today.
Okay.
Where it was signed off for them to continue with following up with the connection, so. Again, I think that it's just all about education of the process. Our processes are not very, they're not going to be as similar with larger, industry, because they have, different departments and different staffing that handle things. So, but again, it really came down to, we have a part-time building inspector, and then scheduling that in with our staff. But I will definitely follow up, because if it's been 16 days, I will check into that and see from that time perspective.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Councilmember Martinez. I'll just pass on that I did receive an inquiry about someone wanting, a local business owner wanting to add solar panels to their property. So I passed that on to our electric superintendent to see if he knew where the process was, and just waiting for a response there. I know we've discussed it, but I couldn't remember exactly what the protocol was or where we were. So I think that's a good thing if we can get that going. City Hall, City Manager Geertz, any public comments or correspondence?
Just as I stated, I spoke with Mr. McFerren with regards to the heritage and working on that. Been in correspondence with the RAGBRAI committee and the chamber, working through getting close to finalizing those things. Spoke with our city supervisors, and we'll be organizing a meeting, so we're all set there. Other than that, talking to a few residents with regards to tree issues, just following up through some storm damage and things like that with residents, and making sure that they've been provided a disaster recovery information. Currently, that's all I have at this time.
Great. City Clerk, Hoffert.
I have the same as Lee, most of the conversations that are coming in are going between one of the 2 of us, sometimes both of us, so. Right now, that's what we've been working on. The tree ones are probably the main items that are coming in from customers right now.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. We have one item of old business, discussion of appropriate action for the Kimberly Park Pool feasibility study. Looks like we have 3 options here. We looked at this with Mr. Heath. Yes, we do need to make a motion. Do you? I think this is all self-explanatory. Nick is recommending which one?
Sure.
I would like to make a motion to go ahead and approve option number 1 to accept the bid from One Design Architecture.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries 5-0. Discussion and appropriate follow-up for a downtown task force.
We make a motion to discuss it. No, yes, I make a motion to discuss the downtown task force. Right? Yes. Do we?
Okay, we have a motion to discuss the downtown task force. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Can you fill us in on this? What are we doing here?
The history of, I tried to collect as much history as I could. as
I
to
think
where
probably
we got.
everybody had a chance to read through it, yeah,
Yeah.
but just, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but just,
No, just
just
to
the
summarize.
recommendation where we go, yeah.
Yeah, so in 2016, the mayor's was a task force for downtown revitalization. There was a group formed to focus on, as you've seen in your memo, discussing about what their focus was to improve the revitalization. There was funds raised to apply for to have a consultant to work with the CBDG grant. Unfortunately, the city did not qualify for that round. So there were some funds that remained. And at that time, the city direction was to keep the money with the We Lead, because We Lead is your nonprofit pass-through. And so We Lead has held the money in a savings account, waiting on the city to make a decision as to what needs to be done with the funds and how they should be allocated. Again, from the historic perspective of that, it was geared towards revitalization, downtown beautification, in line with the downtown task force. So based on that information, the recommendation by Ken Brooks with the lead director and myself and Vicky to have the Chamber of Commerce have those funds and identify a project or banners or some beautification that they can add to the downtown.
So has anyone from the downtown task force who was on it?
It's been
most
dissolved,
recently?
right?
Yeah,
It was dissolved, it doesn't exist.
So Mr. McFerren was on it, so was Ms.
Priscilla has Sig,
Brownie.
Karen, Cindy May,
Yep.
David Smith, Lawrence McDonald, Steve Hansen. Have any of those people been contacted about this plan?
So, Wheelie Director Ken Brooks actually reached out to me, and in the portion where it is talking about, the savings account and the recommendation for the transfer, one of the items that they brought up was the possibility of having a welcome sign in the downtown area in the historic district, which would then go into that beautification as well.
The only reason I ask is because I wasn't involved in any of this at this time, but I kind of came to understand that there was some hurt feelings from the actual downtown task force, individuals who were involved in that, about the way that it got dissolved. And so I don't know the story there, but I just want to, I guess, make sure that the funds are going. I mean, I don't know why anyone would have a problem with them going to the chamber, but just, you know, has anybody talked to anyone who was on the task force? Mr. Brooks, you're nodding. Have you addressed that?
Yes, so two of the members of the Evident Task Force had inquired about 6 months ago, if that pot of money is still there. It was their request that we leave transferred over to the chamber, to be used for downtown beautification. But that money is not officially on our books, so I think
It was initiated by former members of the downtown task force as a request.
it was, and I support it.
That's. Thank you. That's all I need.
Because the task force is now dissolved, there is no purpose for them to do anything with that money at this time. It was taken in the name of the city for that downtown renovation, and when the CBDG grant did not come through, that amount lingered, so
So,
it's the city's decision at this point.
so aside from the money, does beautification, does we need to take care of that now? Or does that?
It's a chamber, that's why they want to go to the chamber.
All right, so
You need a motion?
what do you guys think? We have two options.
I would like to make a motion then to go ahead and transfer those funds to, that Wheelie is
Okay.
putting in their savings account to the.
Now, we're gonna have a point of order here, because I want to clarify how clerk, I'm gonna say deputy clerk a bunch of times, and clerk Hoffert, how would you like us to make these motions? Because we had a motion to discuss it, because that's how it's written here. So how would you like us to proceed on this point?
In there, it has the appropriate follow-up for that, so then it would be consensus as to what you would like to do with those funds, as you already made the motion to discuss and have the appropriate follow-up for it.
So council has a consensus of which option they want, and then they
Correct.
vote on the original motion.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Which option do you want, guys? Option A or option B?
Whatever the one is, we're gonna give it to them.
That'd be option A, give to the chamber.
I agree.
Nodding,
Which one?
okay. All right, we have a consensus to give the money to the Chamber of Commerce, and there's a motion already and a second on the table. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries 5-0. Is there a motion to discuss and appropriately follow up regarding the July 4th council meeting?
Motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. What are we talking about here?
I don't know. If we have a council meeting on July 4th or not.
Oh, it falls on a Tuesday.
Vote no.
What do you want to do? What's the plan?
I say, we take a day off.
Yes, typically they would only have the one council meeting in July. You have the option.
Is that how it's done
to-
typically?
Yep, you have the option to set it for another date if you would so choose. I just need to know how you guys want to proceed with that.
How do you guys want to proceed with that?
Just one meeting in July.
Are in your guys' opinions, is it looking beneficial to have 2 meetings in July? Or we not gonna get tired, just a lot of.
So we do have a lot of items that have come up recently, like with developments and stuff like that, but I still think that one meeting at that second time on the, so it would be the 18th, I think that would still suffice for what we need.
20th? Oh, you're right, 18. Do you
Because
think it would be beneficial to start earlier if
On,
we have a heavy agenda on that, the 18th?
so I would say that we still keep the meeting the same. The items that are probably gonna come through are gonna be more of the project resolutions and stuff like that. And then we also have our prepay policy for our claims and stuff like that, so that we don't miss out on those items.
I'm good with that.
Certainly, if we would see that the agenda is, if we would see that there is a need, then we can always make an option to set a special meeting if we need to, if we start getting, a heavy second meeting agenda. But by the first of the month, we always know, we're gonna know collectively what's coming and what's gonna need to be approved prior to that second meeting. So if it needs to be, we can always make that recommendation. As Clerk has mentioned, historically, we only do one meeting.
Sounds like we have a consensus to do one meeting in July and skip the July 4th meeting. Any further discussion? There's a motion and a second. We'll accept that as a consensus. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries 5-0. We have a resolution amending the employee handbook to update holiday hours and floating holiday hours. Is there a motion to approve? Is that you, Mr. Martinez? Moved and seconded to approve. Lee, can you kind of walk through this real?
Yeah.
So, yes, Mr. Mayor, we met with the employee policy committee and we discussed. Originally, when the handbook was put together, the police department had been working 8-hour shifts, but for the past, I'm gonna say 8 to 10 years, they've worked 12. And so when it comes to holiday time, they're only receiving 8 hours. So if they have a floating holiday, we receive 2 floating holidays a year, they're only allowed 8 hours. So our recommendation is, instead of them having to take an additional 2 hours of their own benefit time to balance it out, not to exceed what their shift schedule would be, which is a 12-hour shift.
Any further questions?
So for example, if they typically work 12 hours in order to get a full day off, they would have to take their own vacation time for those additional hours. But we just want to give them that whole day, right?
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and if they work, not to get confusing, so if they do work the holiday, they're paid time and a half for the hours that they're working on the holiday. They also earn the holiday pay. But likewise, it's a shift equal, so it's equal to the shift that they're working versus being shorted either way 2 hours.
Okay, Chief Worley.
Part of the reason that I brought this up is we've had a few officers had to take bereavement leave or utilize floating holidays, and when they've had to do both of those things, they get 8 hours of credit and had to use 4 hours of vacation to get a day off. So for bereavement, they get 8 hours and then they had to take 4 hours of vacation. So I was just trying to make it equitable for my department, since we're a little bit different. We do work base of 12 hours, that when we're using a floating holiday, it's actually covered that they get a day off, and rather than use 8 hours, then 4 extra hours of vacation to get a day off. If that makes sense.
Excellent. This is a roll call vote for the resolution. Any further discussion? We have a motion and a second to approve. Councilmember McFerren,
Yes.
Councilmember Dominguez,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Schiltz,
Yes.
Councilmember Martinez.
Yes.
The resolution passes 5-0. We have a resolution approving the organization resolution with West Liberty State Bank, Office of South Potomac Savings Bank. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion. Second.
Moved and seconded to approve. City Manager Geertz, is there anything to mention here, or I think it's self-explanatory, it's a regular thing you do?
Yep, it's a resolution set by council authorizing bank authorized officials, as fiduciaries, signatures. Again, identifying with our financial institution, the authority of the city manager, the clerk, the deputy clerk, mayor pro tem. And also that it identifies additional staff as only users for, again, for online banking, but they don't have any transfer authority or any way to move money. So again, we take this to our financial institution, and then we establish those securities and those user authorizations under that resolution.
So why is council looking at this today? Is it something that needs to be done regularly, or is there a change to it?
You have a new city manager, have a new city clerk.
Just to change the
And
name?
we are going to eventually have a new deputy city clerk, and we also have to remove a previous city manager from the existing.
So it's this last page that lists the names of the individual. Okay, makes sense. We have a motion and a second to approve. Any further discussion? It's a roll call vote. Councilmember McFerren,
Yes.
Councilmember Dominguez.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Schiltz.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinez.
Yes.
The resolution passes 5-0. We have a resolution updating the City of West Liberty fee appendix. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion.
What?
I love how you say it. That's all.
Make it exciting. Let's do it. Let's go.
I should say things in a more jaunty way.
Yeah, it makes people happy. Let's make our city council meetings musical. Okay, I'll probably get angry, you know. Anyway.
Let's make sure that happens. Was there a second to this?
Yes.
Motion?
Yeah.
We have a motion. We have actually, and I didn't hear it because it wasn't synced. We have a motion and a second to approve this resolution, and
So we sent the fee appendix out to the department heads. We do quarterly updates to our fee appendix if there's any items that need to be changed. The only items that came back were from the library. I did go ahead and list what they previously were written as on there. So on that one where it says retail cost and that said previously retail cost plus, that's exactly what it said on the fee appendix. She's wanting to change it just to retail cost, and then some of the fees that had previously had fees, she's wanting to make those items free.
And those are policies based on, that's library board policy. These are just updating the, to reflect those.
So it's now free to scan something? Yeah, sweet.
Even with staff.
I know, I saw that.
Even if you need help, we don't let people use the scanner by themselves.
Oh, that's.
If you do that, they charge you.
It's just a workspace boundary. It means they would have to come behind our desk and we don't like it.
And free outgoing faxes, that's nice. I mean, sometimes, you know, you actually need to send a fax.
There's,
Yeah.
it's a line we have always had and we will always have, so people don't want to fax things. It's not a choice that they make. That is something that somebody has asked them to do, and it's usually lawyers, doctors, or
Insurance.
the government. Yeah.
On top of this, I did want to, I don't know how you want this handled, but I wanted to make a comment that I think with this amending and approving this city code fee schedule, I'd like to also see in the future amendment to update the fee code schedule for making sure that when we have PD tickets issued, that it doesn't go to the state, it goes to the city.
That sounds like something we should take up as a broader issue. Okay, great. We have a motion and a second to approve this resolution. Is there any further discussion? This is a roll call vote. I'm gonna go backwards. Councilmember Martinez.
Yes.
Councilmember Schiltz.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Dominguez.
Yes.
Councilmember McFerren.
Yes.
The resolution passes. We have a resolution approving the West Liberty Police Department to enter into a contract with Language Link for translation services. Is there a motion to approve? Motion.
Second.
You got it.
Now we're getting excited. There's a motion and a second. Chief Whirling, you walked us through this a couple meetings back, I think, and I think everyone remembers that. Is there anything else to add or?
It's just as a reminder, Language Link is an entity that the state of Iowa has a current contract with. So we would just be more or less adding on to the contract. There is not a fee for the contract, there is not a yearly fee. The only thing, it's pay as you use it. And the way the service works is once we establish a contract, they're given an identification number. So we call in, give them the ID number, tell them the language, and they connect us with somebody who can translate in that language. Because we're an emergency service, they put us to the front of the line, so it's usually connected within 20 seconds. And whatever data we would like to collect on that, we can do. So I can have them collect the officer's badge number. If we signed a contract for the whole city and other entities needed to use it, we could have one number for the PD, one number for city hall, one number for fire department. So it's really, we can set as many contracts as we want or just one. But I just want to establish at least one for the police department because there are many times we run into barriers with language. And it's difficult to find somebody, and especially with confidentiality, to try and establish a confidential person that we can trust that's going to translate the right way. And this fee is 57 cents per minute. And that's when it's an over the phone consultation. We can pay more for different things. They can do video calls, they can translate documents, but just that minimal phone conversation for the translations, 57 cents a minute.
You know,
Great.
now this would be when, like during regular stops, or would it be something you bring back to the station?
It's 24/7, so I'm gonna give all the information, if we can enter the contract, and give it all the officers, so they can take out their cell phone and make a call, like put it on speaker, and they can, if it's a traffic stop, if it's an interview where they come back to PD, but it's something they'll be able to use on shift anytime, whenever they need it.
I think it'll be a good idea at least to send any like information to the fire chief and to Tammy because especially when they get calls at West Liberty Foods, there's so many languages there, like Swahili or something, you know, like so it might be really beneficial for them to even know that it's a resource.
And that's something that they can sign up the same way, like I said, it's free to do. And if we wanted a contract for the city, we can set it up so the PD has one extra number we put in, so we know it's getting billed to us.
Yeah.
And the fire department has a different, we'll wait for fire department to enter their own, but I will make sure to pass this along to both Chief Sickles and to Tammy.
You'll pass it along. to them.
Yep, I can send it to them and I'll read it and let them know what it is.
Are you aware by chance the typical length of a call?
I asked for some information about that and they said it's really hard to tell. They've got departments like the city of Tampa, their police department utilizes it and they have thousands of minutes a month. But I ran some calculations with our new city clerk. And we were doing calculations like how many 2,000 minutes would be. And the amount that we would spend is not a lot. And for a city like Tampa that's using it all the time, it wasn't a gigantic fee, but they said they really didn't have any data on what normal would look like. So that's part of why I think if the council agrees, I'm gonna move forward and have the officers have to put in their badge numbers. So that I know how much is getting used, which officer is using it, how long, and I'll be able to collect all that data. That's something I can present to council if you like.
I was gonna say, if we move forward with this, could you keep that updated in your?
Report.
Your report to us?
Yes, I can add that in. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, and that generated more discussion than I expected. Any other questions? Okay. We have a motion and a second to approve this resolution. Any further discussion? It's a roll call vote. Councilmember Martinez.
Yeah.
Councilmember Schiltz.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Dominguez.
Yes.
Councilmember McFerren.
Yes.
The resolution passes 5-0.
Thank you.
We have now, yes, 2 items that have come through the planning and zoning board. For council to address. The first is a resolution accepting the final plat of Theresic subdivision request. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion.
Second.
Okay, now something.
More fun.
We have a motion and a second. City manager, Geertz, can you give us a brief overview here? What we're looking at?
I'm going to transfer it over to City Clerk.
City clerk.
Yeah. So we have 2 items on here that are going to be going through and they have actually gone through the county. So they're actually not within city limits. They're within the 2-mile radius of the expansion portion. So these are coming through planning and zoning did recommend this first one that you're looking at. He has 2 lots and his house sits directly in the center of it and they are wanting to split that so that his house has his own lot. So if he ever does decide to do anything in the future, he's able to have his own section that is already split off. He has no plans at this time. But if he ever does have plans in the future, that part is taken care of for him.
Excellent. Any questions? Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve this resolution. If no other discussion, the roll call vote. Councilmember Martinez.
Yes.
Councilmember Schiltz.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Dominguez.
Yes.
Councilmember McFerren.
Yes.
The resolution passes 5-0. We move on to the following resolution on the same topic. A resolution accepting the preliminary and final plat of Next Gen subdivision, West Liberty, Iowa. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion.
Again.
Moved and seconded to approve this. Okay, Attorney Tharp, you're here in the room with us. Would you like to discuss this at all?
It's still Kathy Gingrich. And it's out in Country Heights, there, where the pond is, it's going to be split into 2 different places. It's all been cleared with the county, traffic is fine. You know, as for water, sewer, all that. It's not a problem.
Okay. Any questions by council? Any comments from City Hall?
No, and as Mr. Tharp communicated, we already have the water line out there. There will not be sewer. It will be septic, just as the other ones are. So there's no additional utilities that will be needed out in that area.
Good to know. Any further discussion? We have a motion and a second to approve this resolution. With the roll call vote, Councilmember Martinez.
Yes.
Councilmember Schiltz.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Dominguez.
Yes.
Councilmember McFerrin.
Yes.
The resolution passes 5-0. We have a resolution setting positions and salaries, wages for financial administration and the ambulance department. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve. Who's gonna walk us through this one?
I
Again,
can.
pretty self-explanatory, but
Okay.
I'd like to kind of just get
I can kind of,
Yeah.
so,
what's changing here.
yep, let me get to that one.
We have, I just met Noemi,
Yeah,
at City Hall
Yep.
the other day. She's behind the glass there, on the front line. And, is Bethany Hans the second?
she is,
good
she
news that we
accepted,
have,
yes.
from-
So she accepted, we will now be fully staffed. All of the positions have been posted and closed. So for the movement forward, we will have the 2 administrative clerks on the front line. That's gonna be Noemi and Bethany.
And Noemi
Bethany,
is bilingual.
she is
correct?
bilingual, yes. Yep, and they both came to us with lots and lots of customer service and lots of experience with communities and dealing with difficult customers in different situations.
Great.
They have a lot of de-escalation tactics as well that they are using from nonprofits and from owning their own businesses. So they will be great assets to
That
the
is nice.
team. Yep, and then the part-time paramedic is another paramedic that they have hired, who will just be filling in part-time hours. And then the other 2, Melissa and Emily, will then be promoted into those positions, and we have started that training process. And for those of you that were not part of the employee committee, my plan is to have cross-training, so everybody has a backup. And people are able to be out of the office and those items do fall through. So when we're closed on Wednesdays, what I'm doing is I'm pulling both people into the office. I'm training them on the same items. And then I'm cross-training on the other items that they are handling right now so that they have that backup plan.
That's a great, progression that Melissa and Emily, spent how many months in the front. That's good experience. And then now moving up into these other roles. Super happy to have a bilingual person there at the front line. And another paramedic. It's fantastic. Great. Any other comments or questions? We have a motion and a second to approve this resolution. Again, it's a roll call vote. Councilmember McFerren.
Yes.
Councilmember Dominguez.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yep.
Councilmember Schiltz.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinez.
Yes.
Resolution passes 5-0. We have a resolution to approve pay estimate number 3 from All American Concrete for the Rainbow Mackin Street project. Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve. Pretty self-explanatory. You want to add anything, Leo?
30% complete, things are going well. I talked to Jay Simon tonight. He said that they'll probably switch to phase 2, which is just further down the road of Rainbow, probably the middle of next week. Things are going great, recommended.
That's excellent. Any questions?
When is the completion date again? I'm sorry.
I want to, not 100.
Or a generalized time frame?
This fall, late, before winter.
Yeah.
Was the intent.
Okay, thank you.
Hoping it was on here. It's not. I was reading as fast as I could. Lost a few of the skills from college. I'll send you an email, but I'm certain it's before winter.
Any further questions? Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve this resolution. If no further questions, it's a roll call vote. Councilmember McFerren.
Yes.
Councilmember Dominguez.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Schiltz.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinez.
Yes.
The resolution passes 5-0. We have resolution, which is a change order number 2 from All American Concrete for the same project. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve this change order. We will want you to walk us through this. one.
December 30th, 2023 is the final completion date.
Thank you.
There you go.
Oh, there it is.
Really good at skimming.
His featuring Kim hiring.
Lost some skills, because normally I'd have picked that up pretty quick. Okay, so this change order will be done before the completion date of December 30th. No, what this one is, again, the 2 culverts that we had, that they come up road height, and we thought we could just put the concrete to them, but it actually looks like, especially when we started excavate to them, that the tops weren't as smooth as we thought. So this is kind of a smoothing, putting a smoother thing. They do this on bridges all the time. He gave us a not to exceed of $10,115. He thinks it'll come in quite a bit less than that. This is the end number that it could be. He did tell me that he wanted to wait to do this now until he has a trail done, because he wants to do, so it'll all look the same, road, trail on each one of the culverts.
Yeah, I saw that when I was driving by. They dug it up for
Yeah.
something. I was like,
At the top of it, we were surprised because structurally, we looked at those culverts to make sure you could drive on top of them without us doing anything. And our structures were okay. And we didn't really think about what is it gonna look like compared to the other. This will dress it out. And give you a long wearing service.
Excellent. And that all makes sense. I mean, you recommend to proceed with that.
We recommend approval. Like you said, this is work that hasn't been done and won't be done probably for another 3 months. But that's good. I think it's very smart to do it.
We have a motion and a second to approve this change order. Any other questions? If none, it's a roll call vote. Councilmember Martinez.
Yes.
Councilmember Schiltz.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Dominguez.
yes,
Councilmember McFerren.
yes.
Resolution passes 5-0. What would you guys do if I actually went in a totally different order? I usually either go one way or the other. I'm gonna do my best to throw you off.
Keep us on our toes.
Okay, we made it, guys. This is,
No, we're not
this
done
is
yet.
it's been a long meeting. So now, we have one final item, which is gonna be in closed session, so I'll entertain a motion to enter into closed session. Moved and seconded to enter into closed session for Iowa Code 21.5 to evaluate the professional competency at the request of the city manager, city clerk, whose appointment, hiring, performance, and discharge is being considered. Any further discussion? Councilmember McFerren.
Yes.
Councilmember Dominguez.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Schiltz.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinez. The motion passes and we are in closed session.